All right, today's lesson is going to be all about close reading strategies and what I'm going to call a signpost. We're going to learn a few different signposts for nonfiction. Okay, so what you're going to be able to do by the end of this is identify different signposts in all types of text. So this is mainly nonfiction, but I'm going to show you a few different ones, and then you should be able to use close reading strategies that you can use while reading alone or with a small group. To start, we see patterns everywhere. Maybe you see a pattern on someone's shirt. Behind me, there's a pattern, leopard print. You could see patterns when you're driving somewhere. They're everywhere. So in math, there's problems as well. There's patterns. Just like that, the same thing happens in reading. There are patterns for a reason to help you understand and comprehend a little bit better. If you look closely, you will start to notice patterns in books and in texts. Then you can use those patterns to help you understand what the author is trying to say and who characters are. So we're just going to be talking about nonfiction for right now. So when you notice a pattern, it helps you understand what the purpose is for the author to write that. Maybe it's to inform you on something. Maybe it's to persuade you. Maybe it's to compare and contrast two different restaurants. You want to be able to understand the purpose for your reading so then you can comprehend the purpose the author wants to give to you. By noticing patterns, it will also help to make text to world and text to self connections. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. So there are three big questions that I will ask you throughout the school year with nonfiction. What surprised you? Maybe you're reading an article about, which we will this year, about chicken nuggets, and maybe something surprised you that you did not know about them. Maybe the author is telling you things that you already know, and that's okay. But maybe there's something that's going to challenge or change your thinking, or maybe it just confirmed what you already knew. All of those things are good, but you want to make sure that you discuss those within amongst yourself while you are reading these articles. So for nonfiction, we have different signposts. Now, a signpost is something that sticks out to you. So, for example, if I see a stop sign, that signpost tells me to do what? It tells me to stop. Okay, it's pretty obvious. If I see a yield sign, it's telling me to yield. A stop light tells you to go, to slow down, or it tells you to stop. Same thing in reading. So the first one we're going to talk about is number and stats. So number and stats is literally what it sounds like. If you see a percentage or a statistic, like 1 in 3 Americans eats pizza for lunch, that's what we call a number and stats. For short, it's going to be an NS. So sometimes when we are reading, I'm going to have you take notes and annotate as we go through. And I might say, put an NS next to that sentence because it's a number and stat. And maybe we'll come back to it later on in our reading. The next one is quoted words. So if you have an author who is quoting somebody else or quoting research, that's called a quoted word. So for example, if I'm teaching in class and I say, fears like limits are often just an illusion. That is a quote by Michael Jordan. So that would be considered a quoted word. Typically, you see quotations around that sentence, which is a good indicator. Quoted words indicate to us that someone is referring to something else or bringing in other research. The next one is the contrast and contradiction. This is where the author is telling you something that maybe contradicts what you already know about that topic. So for example, referring back to that chicken nugget example, we're going to read an article about how chicken nuggets are made. And I want you to think about, like, does this change how you thought chicken nuggets were made? Is it confirming what you already know? If you see that, you can go ahead and talk about CC. It contradicts what you already know, or maybe the author is contradicting themselves. Sometimes that happens too. Extreme or absolute language. We'll get into this a little bit more detail on the next slide, but what we do for a shorthand would be EAL, and then our final one is going to be word gaps. A word gap is basically like a vocab word. Wow, that was a really bad G. Pardon my mistake there. Okay, so those are our signposts. And I'm going to go into more detail as we continue on and explain them in a little bit more easier terminology here. So we'll just erase so those don't get in the way. And we will begin. Okay, so numbers and stats. Why did the author use these numbers or amounts? Typically, an author uses them to kind of like wow you, to show you like here's the proof. Here's the statistic about why you should believe this. You want to think about what makes them so important. An example may be an author uses words like many, often, few, more, less than. If you see words like always or never, those are very strong words. And if an author is going to use that, they better back it up with some statistic or they better be able to explain themselves. You also want to look for dates. So like literally numbers, dates, ages, numbers. Those will all stick out to you for numbers and stats.
Is when an author uses specific numbers or amounts or provides statistical information. Like when you notice a number in stat, you should stop and ask yourself, why did the author use these numbers or amounts? It is important to note that numbers and stats do not always need to be specific numbers or amounts. The author may use numerals and words as well as indefinite quantities such as many, most, some, taller than, etc.
Okay, so this is what I wanted to show you, just to explain a little bit more. So it's not just going to be dates or percentages. If you see words like many, most, or some, that's also going to be a number stat. So we'll just exit there. And that's kind of the summary of numbers and stats. And the next one we talked about was quoted words. Why did the author quote this person? So why did Ms. Hoobie quote Michael Jordan? What does the quote tell me about the rest of the text? So if I'm using a quote, it's going to relate to whatever else we are reading. But like why? Why does it explain it? Why are we thinking that's important? These words help tell the author's purpose, how the author feels. Maybe they're giving an opinion on something or you're drawing a conclusion. So by me stating Michael Jordan, maybe you think that I'm a big basketball fan or I really like Michael Jordan. That's a great assumption. That's okay to think that way. You just find those quoted words and put a QW by it. So like this quote, nothing is impossible. The word itself says I'm possible by Audrey Hepburn. That just kind of makes you think, why did Miss Hoobie put this quote on here? Well, she wants me to think that I can do it. Okay, nothing is impossible. All you got to say is I'm possible. I can do this. I just got to keep trying. Our next one is contrast and contradictions. What is the difference and why does it matter? The author tells the difference about what you know and what is happening in the text. So what is the reasoning behind that contradiction? Why are we confused? But why does it also matter? That one's kind of straightforward. Extreme or absolute language. These are not like extreme words like big words. Okay, that's word gaps. Extreme, absolute language is more like why is the author saying it like that? That's when you'll see like always, never. The author is trying to persuade you to think a certain way. When you read these types of words, it may help you understand the author's purpose. The words like always, absolute, forever, the best only. So if I'm like the best pizza place in the entire world is Pizza Hut. I'm using extreme language to try and prove to you that this whole article is going to be about Pizza Hut and they've got the best pizza. So you just write a little EAL by those words. And then the last one is going to be, actually I want to show you this. The quote was, winners are not those who never fail, but those who never quit. So we see a lot of extreme language in there. We see the word never, never. Okay, so it's winners and then never and never. Those are your extreme words. Be kind and never possible because it's always possible. Once again, your extreme word there is going to be always. All right, word gaps. Sometimes you're going to read words and phrases you don't know. For me, still to this day, I find words all the time and I'm like, no idea what that is. Hey Siri, what is the definition of so and so? And then I look it up on Google, and that's totally okay. As long as you're looking it up or trying to dig deeper, use context clues to determine what the word means, that's good. If you just skip over it, your comprehension is not going to be the best that it should. So I feel like a lot of times when students tell me like, I can't comprehend this, I'm not good at reading, it's because they don't know the words. It's okay to not know the words, but you need to be able to problem solve to be able to figure those out. So it's okay to use a dictionary. It's okay to use Google to figure out what those phrases mean. Now, maybe you've heard the word somewhere else. Maybe you've heard it in science class. If I talk about making a prediction or you're exploring, you can use those same words in other context areas to help you understand what it means. Maybe it's a word used by experts. So it's like words you don't know, like research a lot of times uses huge words, especially in science experiments. They're doing that on purpose. You can look up those as well. But the biggest thing is trying to find context clues to help you figure out the meaning of the words. Usually there's words or sentences around that big word or phrase that can help define what it means. And then finally, can I look it up somewhere? Usually it's Google. So here's an example. They traveled the treacherous path and faced many dangers along the way. Now, my word is treacherous. That's a huge word. But what does that mean? Well, if you look here, my bolded, italicized words are my context clues. Faced many dangers. Okay, so if someone is facing many dangers, that's probably not a good thing. So I'm kind of thinking of like Little Red Riding Hood going through the forest to try and find her grandma, running into the wolf. So a treacherous path probably means something that's not safe, maybe because of the surroundings or the way the ground is. It's probably something that's not good. And I know that based upon my context clues. And if you were to look it up, the definition of treacherous is very similar to that of what I just explained. So those are going to be my 5 signposts. I will refer to these several times throughout the school year whenever we're reading nonfiction pieces. So once again, they're number and stats, NS, quoted words, QW, contrast and contradiction, CC, extreme or absolute language, EAL, words like always and never, and then word gaps. Those words that you probably don't know, which would be a WG for short.